A young man runs barefoot through the snow, his feet sinking into the cold, white ground. He continues his desperate sprint through a dark, frozen forest as the snow falls heavily around him. With glowing eyes and a determined expression, he pushes forward shirtless, enduring the biting cold. The scene shifts to a fierce confrontation where a warrior with white hair brutally slams his opponent. The long-haired fighter cries out in agony from the powerful, back-breaking blow, and he is thrown violently to the ground, his body twisting from the impact of the fall. His hands press against the cold, stone floor as he struggles to regain his footing. The other fighter quickly pins him down, asserting complete dominance over his defeated opponent. Pinned and exhausted, the vanquished warrior can only look down, unable to fight back, and the story then moves to the massive and imposing headquarters of the Muram Alliance. Inside a grand hall, a voice is certain that they possess the most advanced martial arts system. With the development of Shimyhak nearing completion, they plan to challenge every martial artist. Namgung Biak, the head of the new Martial Arts Research Society, declares they will not be defeated. The elders of the alliance listen to his bold proclamation, some with faint smiles of approval. A senior member with a long, dark beard remains silent, his expression stern and unreadable. In a training hall, a young shirtless warrior grips a spear, his focus sharp and ready. He raises the weapon, its gleaming tip positioned threateningly close to an opponent's throat. The two men face off in a sparring match, surrounded by other martial artists observing them. As the spear presses into his neck, the opponent lets out a strained cry, struggling to resist. The warrior holds his opponent in a painful position, demonstrating the power of his technique. The spear-wielding warrior strains, his hands trembling as he struggles to maintain his grip on the weapon. His opponent unleashes a powerful technique called Silver Spear Throat Pierce, shattering the spear's shaft. The other fighter quickly grabs a new weapon, a large cleaver, and turns back to face his foe. He swings the heavy blade with incredible force in a move known as the chest blade strike. And so, in another part of the training grounds, a man lies on a bed of nails with a stone block on his chest. A fellow martial artist demonstrates the mountain crusher technique, smashing the stone to pieces. Another disciple shows off the self-splitting ting pom, a powerful chopping attack. A warrior named Danmuk Guang boasts that his body is nearly indestructible and can shatter boulders. Suddenly a fighter with his hair tied back lands a swift, powerful kick directly to Muk Guang's face. The boaster is sent sprawling to the ground, defeated and bleeding from the mouth. His students rush to his side in panic, calling out to their fallen master. Meanwhile, the leader of the Samyu sect disses the new martial arts as weak and unorthodox. In response, the head of the research association calmly grants the sect 3 moves to prove their point. A Shimyuhak practitioner then swiftly strikes the Samyu sect leader with a devastating attack. The defeated elder covers his face, expressing his deep humiliation and shame over the loss. Next, members of the Qingqing sect appear, mocking the other defeated fighters as mere commoners. Soon after, a member of the arrogant Qingqing sect lies on the ground, brutally beaten and defeated. The disgraced warrior stands alone on a high cliff, overlooking a vast misty mountain range. He states that his personal loss does not mean his entire sect is weak. With his honor shattered, the defeated man then steps off the edge of the cliff. On a somber dock, disciples from the Qingqing sect mournfully gather around the body of their fallen senior brother, and the scene flashes back to a brutal fight where another challenger lands a devastating punch on his opponent. The defeated martial artist crashes to the ground, his face a bloody mess, as the audience watches in shock. The one-eyed leader and a senior official observe the outcome with calm and calculated expressions. Two disciples struggle to carry their badly beaten comrade away from the fighting stage. As they leave, the leader of the research society and the crowd erupt in applause for the victor. The camera focuses on the disfigured face of another one of the defeated orthodox martial artists. Another vanquished warrior lies unconscious on the stone floor, his face swollen and covered in blood. Inside a grand hall, the elders of the traditional sects look down with expressions of shame and despair. The one-eyed leader stands before them, a confident smile playing on his lips as he addresses the humbled masters. He states that isolation leads to decline and that the doors of Shimyuhak are open to all who wish to join. Accepting this new reality, the Hainan sect declares they will follow the new current of martial arts. Members of the Hebai Peng clan also join the movement, cheering that Shimyuhak is the future. However, the White Crane sect refuses to join and announces its withdrawal from the Muram alliance in protest. The Beggars sect decides to stay out of the matter entirely, choosing to remain neutral as they always have. Back inside, the one-eyed leader shakes hands with a powerful, long-bearded master, forming a new alliance, and he then begins training his new followers, leading them in rigorous practice sessions. The two masters watch over a courtyard filled with hundreds of disciples practicing the new techniques. Meanwhile, the Juge clan leader, despite being annoyed by inquiries, confirms his clan will also be joining. The final scene shifts to a serene, imposing view of the legendary Shaolin Temple at night. Inside Shaolin Temple, monks meditate as a voice explains their purpose is to fight injustice, not prove themselves in a conflict. and the temple is shown as the land of night, its halls filled with the warm glow of hundreds of lit candles, and a young, masked monk sits in quiet contemplation, surrounded by the flickering candlelight, and his eyes are filled with a calm but unwavering determination, reflecting the temple's serene atmosphere. The scene then transitions to the majestic Wuding Mountain, where a sect is located high among the misty peaks, and so the sound of rustling leaves indicates someone is moving through the dense forest on the mountainside, and a young man in a blue robe and a distinctive hat walks along a path, his back to the viewer. He turns his head slightly, a small, knowing smile on his face as he takes a breath of fresh air. This is Chung Yab, the respected second disciple of the Wuding sect, looking confident and serene. He continues his journey, walking up a long, winding stone path that leads further up the mountain, and the disciple keeps a steady pace, making his way along the weathered and ancient-looking walkway. His eyes widen slightly as he seems to notice something unusual in the distance. He finally arrives at an old, weathered wooden gate, the entrance to a secluded part of the mountain, and the young man stops, his expression turning to one of confusion as he takes in the sight before him. A cracked and broken sign hangs crookily above the gate, suggesting neglect or destruction, and someone's eyes are shown, wide with concern, as a single bead of sweat drips down their face. Suddenly filled with urgency, Chung Yao breaks into a run, rushing through the gate. An overhead view reveals a shocking scene of utter devastation, with buildings reduced to rubble. He stands amidst the ruins, his face a mask of disbelief as he questions what has happened, and he desperately calls out, asking if anyone is there and announcing his arrival to his master uncle. He continues to shout desperately for Master Uncle Jinmu and his senior brother, Sok Hyan, and the only response is the sound of wind whistling through the shattered paper on the windows. Every building he sees is on the verge of collapse, with cracked walls and crumbling rooftops. The disciple walks slowly through the rubble-strewn street, his hope beginning to fade, and he stops and removes his hat, the weight of the silence pressing down on him. With a hand to his head, he stares in disbelief, wondering what could have happened here. Suddenly he notices movement and sees a hand placing 3 incense sticks into a large urn. His head snaps in the direction of the urn, his eyes wide with surprise and a hint of fear. A lone figure stands with their hands clasped in prayer, their back turned to him. Without a second thought, he drops his hat and sprints towards the unexpected survivor. The person is inside a hall, praying before a massive, cracked statue of a deity. As he rushes into the hall, he sees the figure kneeling peacefully amidst the eerie quiet. The person turns around, revealing herself to be Ju Mu Yang, another of Wuding's disciples. She looks up in surprise, recognizing her senior brother standing before her. He calls out her name, a wave of relief washing over him at finding someone alive. The two of them run towards each other across the dusty floor of the grand hall, and so they meet in the middle, embracing tightly in a moment of shared relief and sorrow. Mu-yang closes her eyes, a faint smile on her face as she says he has finally returned. He pulls back to look at her, asking what happened and why her clothes seem different. The young man then demands to know why the temple is destroyed, but she hesitates to answer. With a heavy heart, she begins to explain what happened to their Wuding sect. The young man listens in silence, his expression filled with confusion and concern, and she looks up at him with pleading eyes, her face etched with sorrow and worry. The two of them stand alone in the vast, empty hall, the silence speaking volumes. He asks her what she means, his voice low as a shadow falls across his face. She reveals the sect faced financial ruin and went bankrupt, causing all the other disciples to leave. He stares blankly, trying to process the shocking news of his sect's complete collapse. With a flicker of hope, he immediately asks about the fate of their senior brother, Sok Hyan. Mu Yang explains that he left to find money to prevent the bankruptcy but has not been seen since. He then asks about Master Uncle Jinmu, only to learn he declared Wuding finished and joined another sect. Growing more desperate, the disciple asks about the sect leader and the other elders. She starts to explain their plan to make money, but her voice falters as she lets out a small hiccup. He grabs her shoulders, urgently demanding to know what happened to them as she begins to cry. Sobbing, she confesses they lost everything playing mahjong and are now wanted fugitives due to massive debts. He can only stare in utter disbelief, numbly repeating the word, mahjong, and the disciple then understands that the temple was destroyed by debt collectors who seized all their valuables. She confirms that everything is gone, with only an incense burner and a single banner remaining. Her senior brother lowers his head, his face hidden in shadow as he processes the tragic downfall. He takes a determined step forward, his resolve hardening in the face of despair. The young man then tells her that he has been working in an inn, waiting for his brothers to return, and so he turns away from her, placing a hand on a large wooden pillar to steady himself. She watches him with concern, quietly calling out to her senior brother, and the young man remains silent, his back still turned as the weight of the news crushes him. His body suddenly goes limp, and he begins to slump against the pillar. Mu Yang screams his name in terror as he collapses from the overwhelming shock. She rushes to his side, pleading for him to get a hold of himself amidst the dusty, forgotten hall. The scene shifts to a flashback of a younger Sok Hyan and Chung Yab with their master, and the former headmaster shows them a bronze incense burner, its flames said to have never gone out. He explains that it is a sacred relic, more important to their sect than any treasured sword. A young Suk-Hyen looks up and asks if the flame has truly never been extinguished. The man Suk-Chin Woo, the former headmaster of Wooting, smiles down at his student. He chuckles, praising the young boy for asking such a sharp and insightful question, and the master then confesses that he once let the flame go out by accident when he was a boy, and so recalls how his own headmaster simply laughed, admitting he had done the same thing in his youth. The young disciples look confused, but their master explains that it's different from doing it on purpose. He tells them that the idea of an eternal flame is symbolic, as humans are prone to making mistakes. As long as they carry the will of their ancestors, the spirit of Wudang will never die. Back in the present, Chung Yib lies on a simple mattress, exhausted from the ordeal. He rests in a small, bare room while his junior sister kneels beside him, watching over him. She tells him she is leaving for work and has left food for him to eat. When he wakes up, he simply rolls over in bed, ignoring the food she left for him. The young girl watches him with a sad expression before turning to leave. She slides the door open and quietly exits the room, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The wooden door closes with a soft click, plunging the room back into silence. He remains on the mattress, curled up and motionless in the quiet, sunlit room. Downstairs, the inn is bustling with loud customers drinking and laughing together. Mu Yang works tirelessly behind the counter, responding to a customer's order. A cook hands her 2 bowls of hot samyeon, and she rushes to deliver them to a waiting table. Night falls, and Chung Yib is still lying in bed, his sword propped up against the window frame. The moonlight glints off the blade of his sword as he lies in the shadows, and the sword stands like a silent sentinel in the dark room, watching over the sleeping disciple. Back in the noisy inn, an impatient customer complains about his late order. While rushing to serve another table, the young girl suddenly trips on the wooden floor, and she stumbles and spills the contents of the bowl she was carrying all over the ground. The chaos of the inn continues around her as she looks down at the mess. Upstairs, her senior brother sits up in the dark, drawing his sword from its sheath, and he stares at his own reflection in the polished, gleaming steel of the blade, and so his determined eyes are mirrored in the sword's surface as he contemplates his next move. With a grim expression, he holds the weapon firmly, his resolve hardening in the darkness. Downstairs, Mu Yang kneels on the floor amidst the broken shards, apologizing for her mistake. Annoyed customers walk away, leaving Mu Yang to clean up the mess on the floor by herself. Upstairs, Chung Yeb lies awake in the dark, his eyes open and staring blankly at the ceiling. He turns his head to the side, unable to find rest as thoughts of his fallen sect haunt him. In the corner of the room, the faint glow of incense sticks can be seen burning slowly. The 3 sticks continue to burn, their smoke curling up towards the ceiling in the silent room, and the young man's gaze remains distant, his mind clearly troubled by the events of the day. Elsewhere, his junior sister sits alone in a corner, hunched over in sorrow. She clutches a small pouch tightly in her hands, her expression filled with sadness. From the pouch she pulls out a small, green jade ring tied to a simple string. The young girl looks down at the ring in her hand, her eyes welling up with tears. Back in his room, the disciple stares at the incense burner, its smoke a constant reminder of his past. He lies on his back, the word Grandmaster, echoing in his mind as he remembers his teachings, and the story title appears, signaling a new chapter in the warrior's journey. The next morning, the sun shines brightly on a busy courtyard filled with people. A banner hangs outside the entrance, indicating that the Gaju Inn is open for business. Yuang greets customers with a forced smile, welcoming them to the bustling establishment. She navigates the crowded inn, serving tables and guiding new guests inside. Despite her own worries, the young girl works diligently, wiping down tables for new customers. The inn owner watches from a distance, smoking his pipe with a calculating look on his face, and so he complains that keeping rooms empty for them is bad for business, wishing they would just leave. She listens in silence, her expression somber as the inn owner continues his complaint. The man points out that if not for propriety, she would have to share a room with her senior brother. The young disciple suggests that he could just deduct the peak season fee from her wages instead, and her boss takes a long drag from his pipe, considering her desperate proposal with a thoughtful look, and he flatly refuses, leaving her shocked and confused as she thought he would jump at the idea. The owner explains that if he deducted the fees, she would be left with practically no wages at all. She insists that simply being given food and a place to stay is already more than enough for her. The girl then bows deeply before him, pleading with him to accept her offer. Seeing her persistence, the man finally relents, agreeing to deduct a small amount during peak season. She thanks him profusely for his kindness, while he mutters that he should be the one apologizing. After settling the matter, the owner then changes the subject back to the man she calls senior brother. The young disciple listens quietly, her expression growing serious once more. The man complains that her companion is being too much, just lazing around all day without lifting a finger. He admits they once owed a great debt to the Wuding sect, but seeing her now, he just feels sorry for her, and so she tries to defend her friend, explaining that her senior brother is just a little tired right now. The girl insists that although he is resting longer this time, one day he will surely recover. Meanwhile, upstairs, the young man lies on his mattress, his his eyes open as if he heard everything. The scene shifts to a wider view of the bustling town, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. A mysterious figure wearing a large conical hat and carrying a sword walks through the busy streets. The stranger's face is partially hidden by the hat's shadow, but his expression is calm and focused. The mysterious warrior stops, his uniquely wrapped legs planting firmly on the ground. He adjusts his wide conical hat, his features remaining obscured in the shadow it casts. The traveler's gaze falls upon a sign for the Gaju Inn, which is open for business. With a confident stride, he pushes aside the curtains and steps into the bustling establishment. The young disciple greets him with a welcoming smile, though her boss watches with a wary eye. The stranger tells her to continue her work, to which she agrees immediately. She offers to show him to a table, politely guiding the newcomer inside. The young girl leads him through the crowded inn, past other patrons enjoying their meals. Once they reach an empty table, she asks what he would like to order. The man quietly says her name, remarking that it has been a long time, causing her to freeze. He begins to lift his hat, and she looks on in confusion, trying to place his voice. As the shadow recedes from his face, a faint, familiar smile appears on his lips. He is Jang Suk-hyen, one of Wudang's heroes. He calmly asks if she has been well. The girl's eyes widen in utter shock as she stammers his name in disbelief. Overjoyed, she immediately rushes to the stairs, calling out for her other senior brother. Upstairs, Chung is still lying on his mattress, seemingly asleep and facing the wall. He slowly stirs, his eyes fluttering open as he hears his name being called from downstairs. Suk-hyen enters the room behind her and greets his brother, asking if his mission went well. And Chung Yeob glances over his shoulder, his expression unreadable as he sees his long-lost brother. And so a tense silence fills the room as the two visitors look down at their brother on the mattress. And Suk-hyen reassures the girl that is alright, saying their brother must be tired. But she scolds Chung Yeob for his disrespectful attitude, telling him to stand up and greet his senior. And she suddenly looks confused, wondering why her other senior brother is not paying attention to his brother. Suk-hyen ignores the situation, instead looking at the incense burner and asking why it is in the room. The scene flashes back to the destroyed wooden beams of the Wudang sect's main hall. Mu Young stands beside him with a sad expression as she begins to explain the situation. She describes the complete devastation of their home, a field of rubble under a bleak orange sky. The girl explains she offered incense every day until a great storm destroyed the Taoist hall last year. Still, she brought the burner to the inn to keep the flame alive. He praises her for enduring so well, and she looks up at him, her eyes wide with surprise and relief at his kind words. He tells her not to worry any longer, because both he and Chung Yeob have finally returned. With a determined look, Suk-hyen declares that they will start the Wudang sect over again. The young disciple is moved to tears, a hopeful smile appearing on her face. Later that night, a bright full moon hangs in the sky above the quiet inn. Inside their room, a single lantern casts a warm glow over the simple wooden furniture, and Suk-hyen sits beside his sleeping brother, telling him that he has heard the story and understands his hardship. And Chung Yeob remains motionless, his back turned to them as he lies silently on the mattress. Hyen's expression turns to concern as he calls out his brother's name, but gets no response, and he tries to encourage him, saying they can start again now that they are all reunited. From the bed, Yeob finally speaks, his voice low as he asks what they mean by starting over, and Suk-hyen forces a laugh, saying they will of course rebuild their Wudang sect. And so he reminds him that their own grandmaster was once an expelled disciple who founded their great sect. But Chung Yeob dismisses the story, claiming that their founder was a legend and the real story is different. With a wary tone, he tells his brother that he believes he has already done his duty to the sect. He declares that whether they re-establish Wudang or not, it has nothing to do with him anymore. The young girl grows angry, asking if he will really keep up this attitude until the very end, and frustrated she tries to drag him out of bed, declaring her name as the second disciple of Wudang. She demands that he stand up at once and face the injustice and evil that pervades the world. Suk-hyen watches in amusement as his brother complains about his pants being pulled. The next day, the upper floor of the inn is quiet and dimly lit by a few lanterns. A young disciple is shown tying his sash, his expression resolute and determined. He finishes adjusting his uniform, his face set with a newfound sense of purpose. With his sword strapped to his back, he looks ready to face any challenge that comes his way. He stands tall and proud, his demeanor completely transformed from the day before. This is the real Chung Yeob, his eyes now filled with the spirit of a true Wudang warrior. And so he tells Suk-hyen that he is ready, urging him to forget about their other brother for now. And Suk-hyen remarks that their brother still seems to be holding on to something from his past mission. And so Chung Yeob admits he does not know what happened but is fed up with his sulking. Hyen listens with a gentle smile, his gaze understanding and patient, and so he then tells the young disciple that he should stay behind with their brother, much to his surprise. Suk-hyen admits he was too hasty in demanding their brother to join him, but he tells the other disciple that he has been working on something to convince him, and he is confident that once their brother sees the result, he will believe and follow. So with a hand on his junior's shoulder, he asks him to take good care of their brother until then. He reassures him that everything will be fine and promises to return soon. And so the young warrior looks down, reluctantly agreeing to stay behind and watch over his brother. Hyan gives him a final, encouraging smile before turning to leave on his mission. Before departing, he asks if his junior also has the Wudang sect's flag. They stand in the quiet courtyard at night, the air thick with unspoken emotions, and the young man asks if carrying the heavy incense burner will be uncomfortable for him. Hyan dismisses his concern, saying the fragrance of the incense will be refreshing. He entrusts the care of their brother to him and promises to send word soon. With the heavy urn in his arms, the warrior walks away into the night, leaving his junior behind. The young disciple calls out after him, pleading for him to take care of himself. And Hyan stops for a moment, his back to his friend as he stands alone in the empty courtyard. He continues on his journey, a solitary figure walking through the silent, moonlit town. The remaining disciple watches him go, a look of worry and determination on his face. Back in the room, the moonlight streams through the window, casting long shadows. Their brother lies peacefully asleep on his mattress, unaware of the conversation that took place. He seems to be in a deep slumber, his face calm and his breathing steady in the quiet room. A flashback shows a young Hyan introducing himself to Chung Yab, his first junior disciple. The two boys are seen training together, running laps as Hyan encourages his exhausted friend. Another memory shows the young disciples training shirtless in the harsh, cold snow, and they shiver and gasp for air, their bodies pushed to the limit under their master's watchful eye. Their master Ching-woo sits calmly in the snow, painting a picture of his students. He lets out a soft chuckle, a look of pride and affection on his face as he observes their training. The wise master holds his brush with a steady hand, capturing the moment with skill and grace, and his brushstrokes bring the scene to life, depicting the young warrior's determination and spirit. Back in the present, Chung Yab opens his eyes, a thoughtful expression on his face. His gaze drifts up to a scroll hanging on the wall, a memento from his past, and the scroll contains the painting his master made that day, a picture of them training in the snow. He closes his eyes again, the memories of his training and his master's words flooding his mind. Lying in bed, he recites a poem about climbing a lofty summit and leaving worldly troubles behind. The words of the poem are shown over the image of the painting, emphasizing its significance. Sometime later, a heavy rainstorm pours down on the inn, soaking the quiet courtyard. A lone traveler in a straw cloak and conical hat steps through the inn's entrance, seeking shelter. A young boy and a girl, both working at the inn, greet the newcomer with a polite welcome. The traveler reveals he is alone and asks the boy if there is someone named Ju-mu Yang here. The boy's eyes widen in surprise at the unexpected question, his expression filled with curiosity. The girl steps forward, confirming that she is the one the stranger is looking for. So the traveler hands her a letter, explaining that it was entrusted to him by Jang Hyan. After delivering the message, the man prepares to leave, tipping his hat in a polite gesture. She stops him, asking him to wait for a moment before he departs into the rainy night. The girl offers him a free meal, insisting that he must be tired from his journey. Inside the cozy inn, the warm glow of a lantern illuminates shelves of wine and supplies. The messenger gratefully accepts her offer and begins to enjoy a hot bowl of noodles. Meanwhile, the young disciple opens the letter and begins to read its contents. The letter is from her senior brother, who expresses his concern for her and their other brother. He writes that he has decided to open an escort bureau as the first step to reviving their sect. The girl's eyes light up with excitement as she reads that he has found allies and received approval. Overjoyed, she calls out to her senior brother, eager to share the wonderful news with him. With the letter in hand, she rushes upstairs, tripping and stumbling in her excitement. The scene transitions to a bright, sunny day, a symbol of the renewed hope for their sect. Large, colorful floral wreaths stand outside a newly established building, celebrating its opening, and a crowd of people has gathered in the courtyard to witness the inauguration ceremony. Hyan stands at the entrance, graciously thanking an elderly guest for attending the event. Another well-wisher congratulates him on the inauguration of his new escort bureau. As he greets his guests, a familiar voice calls out his name, catching his attention. A young man in a Shaolin uniform stands before him, introducing himself as Nang Ho Sang. Hyan's face lights up with a warm smile as he greets his old friend and ally. The two friends shake hands, happy to be reunited after such a long time. The Shaolin disciple congratulates Hyan on the inauguration and wishes him success. As he is led inside, a group of onlookers watches with expressions of suspicion and distrust. Hyan and his friend exchange a quick, concerned glance as they notice the staring crowd. The townspeople seem wary of the newcomers, their faces filled with apprehension. Suddenly a cheerful voice calls out, and a young disciple waves enthusiastically from a distance. It is Mu Yang, who has arrived with a wooden cart and congratulates her senior on the founding. He welcomes her but is surprised to see the cart she has brought with her. Lying inside the cart is Chung Yab, looking disheveled and barely conscious. Hyan stammers his brother's name in shock, a bead of sweat rolling down his face. Chung Yab groans, his eyes half open as he is roused from his slumber, and he raises a hand to shield his eyes from the bright sunlight, clearly annoyed by the disturbance. Mu Yang helps him out of the cart, and he reluctantly thanks her for bringing him. She notes that the fresh air seems to have lifted his spirits, much to Hyan's relief. Hyan begins his inauguration speech, expressing his gratitude to all the esteemed guests. He recounts the glorious history of the Wuding sect, once a pillar of the martial world, and the warrior then acknowledges their downfall, admitting they failed to adapt to the changing times, but he declares that they have been given a chance to rise again through fateful ties. And Chung Yub listens from the crowd, his expression thoughtful as he leans against the cart, and some guests however are unimpressed, commenting on the shabby state of the new escorts. Chung Yub's eyes narrow, a spark of defiance in his gaze as he listens to his brother's speech. The Shaolin disciple stands with his arms crossed, his expression serious as he takes in the words. An elderly guest yawns, clearly bored by the lengthy and idealistic speech. Suk Hyan concludes his address, thanking the audience and asking for their support. Mu Yang claps enthusiastically, while her other brother covers his face in embarrassment. A few other guests offer polite, half-hearted applause, their expressions unimpressed. And so a young man then announces that there will be a martial contest to celebrate the opening. The girl is surprised by this, turning to her senior brother to ask what is going on. Someone in the crowd recognizes her, calling out her name in surprise, and she turns to see who it is, while her brother peeks over the edge of the cart with a weary sigh. The Shaolin disciple approaches them with a friendly smile, confirming that it is indeed her. Chung Yub groans, recognizing the visitor as an old acquaintance from his past. The Shaolin warrior is overjoyed to see him, shaking his hand and exclaiming how long it has been. But he notices his friend's strange behavior and asks if he is feeling unwell. The girl quickly explains that her senior brother has just been feeling lethargic lately. She then politely asks the stranger for his name, not having recognized him at first. He introduced himself as Nangho Sang, a disciple of Shaolin, with a respectful gesture. She returns the gesture, introducing herself as a disciple of Wudang. She proudly declares that she is Chung Yub's junior sister, telling him to watch his words. The Shaolin disciple laughs, suggesting they all head to the contest stage to see the fights. He explains that the contest is an old custom for new martial artists to prove their worth. The girl listens with a worried expression, understanding the gravity of the situation. But the Shaolin disciple reassures her that it is now just a formality for entertainment, and she breathes a sigh of relief, glad that they will not have to fight seriously. He jokingly adds that in the past, some of these duels were fought to the death in secret, and the sound of a large drum echoes through the courtyard, signaling the start of the contest. A massive crowd has gathered around the contest stage, eager to witness the fights. A group of elderly martial arts masters makes their way to the VIP seating area. They walk along a wooden corridor, their long robes flowing behind them. The masters exchange polite greetings with other esteemed guests as they arrive. They are led up a flight of stairs to a raised platform with a perfect view of the stage. One of the elders takes his seat, his expression calm and authoritative. Several other guests, including the new escorts, are also seated and waiting for the contest to begin. The girl wonders why so many people are here, most of whom do not even look like martial artists. She worries that important techniques could be exposed to the public, but her friend simply smiles, telling her that times have changed. A burly, rough-looking warrior sits among the audience, his arms crossed in a challenging posture. Hyan sits calmly in his seat, his eyes closed in quiet contemplation, and the drummers stand ready, their hands poised to signal the start of the first match. One of the elderly masters stands up, his hand resting on the arm of his chair. He introduces himself as Hong Chi and Myung, the former Southern Region Chief of the Martial Alliance. And so, the elder explains that their aim is to encourage the learning of martial arts for the good of the nation, and he hopes that each representative will display their best skills and bring honor to the country. With a final blessing for the new escort bureau, he concludes his opening speech. An announcer then explains the rules of the contest, which will be a best of 5 series of matches. He adds that a match can also be stopped if a contestant loses consciousness or the referee deems it unsafe. Suk Hyan listens with a serious expression, understanding that these rules are for the fighter's safety. The announcer calls for Suk Hyan of the Wuding Escort Bureau to step onto the stage. He walks through the cheering crowd, his expression calm and focused as he approaches the stage. The young girl shouts encouragement from the sidelines, wishing her martial uncle the best of luck. He gives her a subtle, confident smile, acknowledging her support without breaking his focus. His Shaolin friend approaches him, his expression serious as he offers a word of caution. He warns him to be on guard, as they do not know what schemes the Shimuhak sects might be plotting, and so Suk Hyan thanks him for the warning, his hand resting on his friend's shoulder in a gesture of gratitude. With a determined stride he walks up the stairs and onto the grand contest stage. He stands tall and proud, adjusting his sleeves as he prepares for his first match, and his opponent, a large and muscular man, is already waiting for him in the center of the stage. The other fighter cracks his knuckles, a look of arrogance on his face as he sizes up his opponent. From his seat, the elder announces that the contest may now officially begin. Suk Hyan assumes a fighting stance, his hands held up in a traditional Wudang salute. His opponent returns the salute with a confident smile, his hands clasped in a gesture of respect. The two fighters face each other in the center of the stage, surrounded by a roaring crowd. Suk Hyen stands ready, his body poised for action as he waits for the match to begin. The other warrior also assumes his fighting stance, his fists clenched and ready to strike. In the audience, the Shaolin disciple watches with a serious expression, while Chung Yib looks on with disinterest. The young man seems completely uninvested in the fight, his gaze distant and unfocused. The elder gives the signal, and the contest officially begins with a loud shout. The two fighters stand in the center of the ring, the crowd cheering wildly around them. Hyen calmly assesses his opponent, his eyes sharp and his body relaxed. The other warrior prepares to attack, his fists raised in a classic boxing stance. From the sidelines, the Shaolin disciple watches intently, his arms crossed in anticipation. The two men circle each other for a moment, sizing each other up before making a move. Suk Hyen remains calm and composed, his defensive stance impeccable and ready for anything. He easily blocks his opponent's first punch, his movements fluid and precise. He stumps his foot on the ground, grounding himself and preparing to counterattack. His eyes are filled with a calm but unwavering determination, reflecting his confidence. He dodges a swift kick from his opponent, his body moving with incredible speed and agility. Suk Hyen continues to block and parry his opponent's attacks, his defense seemingly impenetrable. He then lands a powerful blow to his opponent's side, his hand moving with lightning speed. The Wudang disciple gracefully evades another attack, his movements a blur of motion, and the fight intensifies, the two warriors moving in a blur of motion as the crowd watches in awe. Members of the new escort bureau cheer enthusiastically, their faces filled with excitement and pride. The elderly masters, however, watch with serious expressions, their faces unreadable. From the sidelines, the Shaolin disciple and the girl watch intently, their eyes glued to the stage. The Shaolin warrior notes that Wudang's defensive style is at a disadvantage against the aggressive Shimuhak. He observes that while Suk Hyen's reach helps, victory will depend on reading his opponent's moves. He worries that the Shimuhak's swift opening attacks may be too much for his friend to handle. Chung Yab, however, is distracted by a strange smell coming from his brother. Hyen raises his hand in a defensive posture, his expression calm and focused. His opponent pauses for a moment, surprised by the Wudang disciple's unwavering composure. The other warrior stumps his foot, gathering his energy for another powerful attack. Hyen deflects a blow to his face, his movements precise and economical. His opponent unleashes a flurry of punches, but the Wudang disciple dodges them with ease. With a fierce expression, he closes in, preparing to land a decisive blow. He strikes his opponent's chest with a powerful open palm attack, sending him staggering backward. With a swift leg sweep, he sends his opponent crashing to the ground. The girl cheers wildly from the sidelines, her fists clenched in excitement. The defeated warrior groans in pain, his body aching from the powerful throw. He looks up in disbelief, shocked by his opponent's incredible skill and power. And Suk Hyen quickly pins him to the ground, his arm locked in a powerful hold. He tightens his grip, his fist pressing firmly against his opponent's throat. The defeated warrior struggles for a moment, his face contorted in pain and surprise. He looks up at his opponent, a look of confusion on his face as he realizes he has been outmatched. Suk Hyen looms over him, his expression calm and his body poised to strike again. His eyes are filled with a quiet intensity, his focus unwavering as he controls the fight. Unable to escape, the other warrior is forced to concede defeat, his voice strained. An announcer declares victory for the Wudang escort bureau, and the crowd erupts in cheers. The girl cheers wildly, while the Shaolin disciple remarks that it was a clean and impressive hit. The new escorts are overjoyed, exclaiming that their leader's plan has worked perfectly, and so a young recruit is amazed, realizing that the stories he heard about Wudang's strength were true. Suk Hyen helps his defeated opponent to his feet, a gesture of sportsmanship and respect. The elderly masters are pleased, noting that Wudang has saved face in the first contest. The girl praises her martial uncle's incredible skill, her voice filled with admiration. He glances back at her with a faint, confident smile, acknowledging her support. A sparkle of light seems to flash in his eyes as he turns back to the center of the stage. He looks up at the sky, his heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. A flashback shows the three young disciples walking together, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. The announcer calls for the second challenger to step onto the stage. A new opponent walks towards the center of the ring, his expression serious and determined. The man is a skilled martial artist, his face weathered and his gaze sharp. Suk Hyen watches the next challenger with a calm and focused expression. The girl looks on in silence, her brow furrowed with concern for her senior brother, and she hesitates for a moment before turning to the Shaolin disciple with a question. She asks him to explain what he meant earlier about Shimuhak and her martial uncle. The Shaolin warrior looks up at the sky, thoughtfully considering how to explain the situation. He begins by stating that the martial world is now divided into two factions, Shimuhak and old martial arts. Shimuhak is a pragmatic school that values speed and suppression, and it has spread rapidly. Meanwhile, the traditional skills practiced by Wudang are now categorized as old martial arts. He explains that many now see the old ways as outdated and bound to be weeded out. The Martial Alliance estimates that over half the sects now use Shimuhak, including the judges. He laments that their world has grown smaller, as the old ways are being pushed aside. On the stage, Suk-Hyun easily dodges another punch from his new opponent. The girl listens in stunned silence, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief, and she had no idea that such a major shift was happening in the martial world. Chung Yeub listens from his cart, his expression unreadable as he takes in the news. Suk-Hyun blocks a kick from his opponent, his movements still fluid and effortless. He gracefully evades another attack, his body moving with a dancer's agility. He then blocks a powerful punch with his forearm, his defense as strong as ever. The two fighters exchange a series of blows, their movements a blur of motion. Suk-Hyun remains calm and focused, his gaze fixed on his opponent as he prepares his next move. His opponent watches him with a calculating gaze, searching for an opening in his defense. The challenger unleashes a powerful spinning kick, aiming for Suk-Hyun's head. The Wudang disciple is surprised by the sudden and aggressive attack, his eyes widening in alarm. The kick connects with a sickening thud, sending a shockwave through Suk-Hyun's body. He stumbles backward, his hair flying as he struggles to regain his balance, and his opponent presses the advantage, landing a sharp blow to his arm and breaking his guard. He follows up with a barrage of punches, striking Suk-Hyun's head and body with brutal force. The girl gasps in horror from the sidelines, her hand covering her mouth in shock. The challenger continues his relentless assault, not giving his opponent a moment to recover. Suk-Hyun is pummeled by the flurry of blows, his body taking a severe beating. He grits his teeth, his arms raised in a desperate attempt to block the incoming attacks. The other warrior grabs him by the hair, preparing to land a devastating finishing blow. But Suk-Hyun reacts quickly, grabbing his opponent's arm and twisting his body. He forces the challenger's head down, his grip like iron as he prepares a counterattack. He then unleashes a powerful palm strike, sending a wave of energy through his opponent's body. The man staggers backward, his body trembling from the force of the blow. He looks down in disbelief, shocked by the sudden turn of events. Hyun presses his advantage, his movements now filled with a newfound ferocity. The crowd cheers wildly, their excitement reaching a fever pitch as the fight intensifies. The elderly masters watch with keen interest, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration. The defeated warrior lies on the ground, groaning in pain from the powerful counterattack. Hyun slams his hand down on his opponent's head, pinning him to the stage. He holds him firmly, his expression cold and his body poised to strike again. His eyes are filled with a fierce intensity, his focus entirely on his defeated foe. With a wry smile, the challenger concedes defeat, admitting that his opponent is impressive. The crowd cheers as Suk-Hyun stands victorious in the center of the ring. The girl covers her face in embarrassment, while the Shaolin disciple watches with a knowing smile. The other local martial artists watch from their seats, their expressions a mix of surprise and concern. The burly warrior who fought first gives a slight smirk, impressed by the Wudang disciple's skill. He sits among the other challengers, his gaze fixed on the stage with newfound respect. The elderly masters are also intrigued, their expressions thoughtful as they observe the young warrior. The first challenger looks on with a smug grin, clearly enjoying the turn of events. He then stands up, ready to step onto the stage as the third challenger is called. The crowd parts as the large warrior makes his way to the contest stage. The Shaolin disciple's eyes narrow, a look of suspicion on his face as he watches the man. The new challenger steps onto the stage, his presence radiating a powerful and dangerous aura. Suk-Hyun watches him approach, his expression calm and his body ready for the next fight. A dark, ominous energy seems to surround the newcomer, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. And so the two fighters face each other, the air thick with tension as they prepare to battle. The announcer calls for the third contestant to step onto the stage, and the burly man smiles. The new challenger steps onto the stage, his large frame casting a shadow over his opponent. Suk-Hyun watches him approach, his expression calm and his body ready for the next fight. A dark, ominous energy seems to surround the newcomer, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. The two fighters face each other, the air thick with tension as they prepare to battle. From the sidelines, the Shaolin disciple and the girl watch with concern, sensing the danger, and the challenger cracks his knuckles, a confident smirk on his face as he prepares to attack. Suk-Hyun returns the gesture with a formal salute, his expression serious and focused. The other warrior rushes forward, his movements surprisingly fast for a man of his size. Suk-Hyun's eyes widen in surprise at his opponent's incredible speed and power. The challenger leaps into the air, his foot stomping down with immense force. He soars through the air, his body a blur of motion as he unleashes a powerful flying kick. The girl gasps in shock, her eyes wide with fear for her martial uncle's safety. The world seems to slow down as the powerful kick hurtles towards its target. The challenger's foot flies through the air, aimed directly at Suk-Hyun's head. The Wudang disciple grits his teeth, his eyes narrowed as he prepares to counter the attack. The girl calls him cowardly for not attacking first, her voice filled with frustration. But the challenger lands a brutal punch before Suk-Hyun can even finish his salute. The elderly masters are outraged, calling the attack shameless and a breach of etiquette. But the Shimuhak supporters in the crowd defend the action, saying it is the true way of their school. The girl looks on with a worried expression, her heart pounding with fear and uncertainty. Suk-Hyun remains silent, his eyes narrowed as he endures the brutal assault, and the challenger grabs him by the hair, preparing to land a devastating knee strike. Suk Hyen grits his teeth in pain, his body taking a severe beating from the relentless attacks. The elderly masters in the audience are shocked, their faces filled with disbelief, and Suk Hyen uses his opponent's momentum against him, twisting his body and throwing him off balance. The two fighters' legs become entangled, their movements a blur of motion as they grapple for control. Suk Hyen lands a powerful blow at his opponent's head, sending a shockwave through his body. He follows up with a swift kick to the chest, his movements filled with a newfound ferocity, and so the challenger is sent flying backward, his body crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. Suk Hyen stumbles, his body bruised and battered from the intense fight. He stands over his defeated opponent, his expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. The challenger looks up at him with a confident smirk, seemingly unfazed by the fall. Suk Hyen watches him with a wary expression, his guard still up as he prepares for the next move, and the other warrior taps his own chest, a gesture of confidence and a challenge to his opponent. Suk Hyen's eyes widen in surprise as he notices something strange about his opponent. The girl is shocked, her fists clenched in anticipation as she watches the fight unfold. Suk Hyen's eyes are filled with a dawning realization, his expression a mix of shock and understanding. The challenger stands tall and proud, a confident smile on his face as he beckons his opponent forward. He recognizes the strange stance his opponent has taken, realizing it is a specific martial art. The crowd murmurs in excitement, recognizing the legendary hand, grappling arts of offense and defense. And the challenger smirks, mockingly asking if he is performing the technique correctly. Hyen is speechless, a bead of sweat rolling down his face as he realizes the mockery. A flashback shows him and his brother training under their master, learning the ways of Wudang. The crowd murmurs, confused by the challenger's strange and unexpected behavior, and some spectators are shocked that a Shinmihak practitioner would use an old martial arts technique. The new recruits are confused, asking what the hand grappling arts of offense and defense even is. From the sidelines, the girl and the Shaolin disciple watch with serious expressions, and the Shaolin warrior realizes that this is a deliberate provocation against the old martial arts. The challenger taunts Suk Hyen, saying he is lowering himself to his level to save him face. The girl understands the trap. If he accepts, he admits inferiority, but if he refuses, he looks like a fool. And so the Shaolin disciple urges his friend not to accept, telling him to fight with all his strength, and the challenger continues his taunts, telling Suk Hyen to just accept and end the fight quickly. Suk Hyen remains silent for a moment, his expression unreadable as he considers his options. With a calm and determined voice, he firmly refuses the challenger's condescending offer. The other warrior simply smirks, seemingly expecting this response from the Wudang disciple. He then unleashes a devastating punch, his fist connecting squarely with Suk Hyen's face. The Wudang disciple stumbles backward, his vision blurred as he struggles to stay on his feet. He groans in pain, his face bruised and bleeding from the powerful blow. He and his opponent exchange a series of rapid blows, their movements a blur of motion, and Suk Hyen is hit with another powerful punch, his head snapping back from the force of the impact. The girl gasps in horror as she watches her martial uncle take a brutal beating. Suk Hyen is pummeled by a relentless barrage of kicks and punches from his opponent. He manages to block a powerful kick, but the force of the blow sends him staggering backward. The challenger smirks, surprised by the Wudang disciple's resilience and determination. The two fighters continue their fierce exchange, their movements a blur of speed and power. Hyen raises his arms to block a powerful punch, his face grim with determination. He uses his opponent's momentum to throw him to the ground, but the challenger quickly recovers. The girl cheers him on from the sidelines, her voice filled with a mix of fear and hope. The other warrior grabs Suk Hyen's hair, preparing to land a devastating knee strike. He twists Suk Hyen's arm, his grip like iron as he tries to break his opponent's guard. Suk Hyen grits his teeth in pain, his face bruised and bleeding from the intense fight. The challenger's eyes are filled with a cold, ruthless determination as he presses his attack. Suk Hyen unleashes a powerful uppercut, his fist connecting squarely with his opponent's jaw. The other warrior looks up, surprised by the sudden and powerful counterattack. Suk Hyen watches him with a worried expression, his guard still up as he prepares for the next move. The challenger smirks, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip with a confident gesture. He grabs Suk Hyen's arm, his grip tightening as he prepares to deliver another brutal blow. He then unleashes a powerful spinning kick, his foot connecting with Suk Hyen's head. From the sidelines, the girl and the Shaolin disciple watch in stunned silence. Suk Hyen stumbles backward, spitting blood as he struggles to stay on his feet. He lands a brutal punch to Suk Hyen's face, sending blood splattering across the stage. The Wudang disciple stumbles, his face a bloody mess as he struggles to stay conscious. The challenger unleashes a barrage of punches, his fists a blur of motion as he pummels his opponent. He continues his relentless assault, his face a mask of brutal determination. From the sidelines, the girl cries out in horror, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Sukhayan is overwhelmed by the flurry of blows, his body taking a severe and bloody beating. Suddenly the Shaolin disciple leaps onto the stage, his face filled with rage and concern, and so lands a powerful punch to the challenger's face, calling him an insolent brat. The other warrior is surprised by the sudden interference, his eyes widening in shock, and the Shaolin warrior follows up with a swift kick, sending the challenger sprawling to the ground. The elderly masters are outraged, their faces contorted in anger at the unexpected interruption. The crowd erupts in chaos, some demanding that the interferer be thrown out for disgracing the duel. The Shaolin disciple stands protectively over his fallen friend, his gaze fixed on the defeated challenger. The other warrior glares at him with hatred, his teeth gritted in anger at the unexpected turn of events. The girl rushes to Sukhayan's side, her arms wrapping around him in a comforting embrace. He reassures her that he is fine, his voice weak as he struggles to sit up. The announcer is furious, shouting that in the past, interfering in a duel was punishable by death. But the Shaolin disciple stands his ground, declaring his name and raising an objection to the duel's fairness. He argues that Sukhayan showed mercy, but his opponent responded with cruel and unfair retaliation. The elderly masters fall silent, their expressions thoughtful as they consider the young warrior's words. He angrily questions if attacking during a salute is truly the law of the martial world today. The elderly masters remain silent, their faces unreadable as they listen to the young man's passionate plea. One of the elders finally speaks, stating that the martial alliance now pursues practical duels. He declares that a duel does not end until one fighter falls or admits defeat, regardless of tradition. The Shaolin disciple points out that his friend's choice to show mercy was his own. He argues that Sukhayan must now bear the consequences of that choice, no matter how unfair. The young warrior tries to argue that by custom, a duel should be fought with honor. The elder scoffs at the mention of custom, his eyes narrowing with disdain. The Shaolin disciple is taken aback by the elder's harsh words, a bead of sweat rolling down his face. And so, the old master angrily declares that it is their clinging to old customs that has made them weak. The Shaolin warrior's eyes narrow in anger, his fists clenched at his sides. The elder reminds him that in the old days, duels were fought to the death without any regard for honor. So the Shimuhak supporters in the crowd cheer in agreement, demanding that the interferer step down, and they shout that receiving victory out of pity is the greatest humiliation a warrior can face. The girl watches with a worried expression, her heart aching for her defeated martial uncle. Sukhayan finally speaks, his voice weak as he admits that he has lost the match. He thanks his friend for her concern, reassuring her that he is alright now, and he then addresses the crowd, admitting that his arrogance led to his defeat and asking for forgiveness. The elderly masters listen in silence, their expressions a mix of surprise and grudging respect. He thanks his Shaolin friend for stepping in, but tells him that he will now take over again, and the Shaolin disciple watches in silence, his expression grim as he realizes the gravity of the situation. The announcer orders all unrelated parties to leave the stage so the fourth duel can begin. The next challenger unleashes a brutal punch, his fist connecting squarely with Sukhayan's face. Blood splatters across the stage as the wounding disciple is sent reeling from the powerful blow. The girl covers her mouth in horror, her eyes wide with fear for her martial uncle. The crowd murmurs, some pitying Sukhayan while others mock him for his weakness, and some spectators comment that old martial arts simply cannot match the power of Shimuhak. Sukhayan is hit with another devastating blow, his body taking a severe and bloody beating. He crashes to the ground, his vision blurred as he struggles to stay conscious. He forces himself to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. He looks up at his opponent, his eyes filled with a defiant and unwavering spirit. The other warrior asks if he will continue, his voice laced with a condescending tone. Sukhayan staggers to his feet, his body bruised and battered but his will unbroken. He raises his hands in a defensive posture, his gaze fixed on his opponent. He is met with another powerful blow, his head snapping back from the force of the impact. The fight continues in a brutal and one-sided fashion with Sukhayan taking a severe beating. The crowd cheers wildly, their excitement fueled by the brutal and bloody spectacle. The girl covers her eyes, unable to watch as her martial uncle is pummeled into submission, and the Shaolin disciple watches with a heavy heart, realizing the impossible odds his friend is facing. He understands that it is not about making old martial arts mainstream, but about changing people's perceptions, and he laments the injustice of a world where those with different values are oppressed by the mainstream. Sukhayan clings to his opponent, his body bruised and bloody but his spirit unbroken. He acknowledges the strength of Shimuhak but argues that no majority has the right to oppress the minority. He stumbles backward, his body finally giving out after the relentless and brutal assault. Blood splatters across the white background, a stark and brutal image of the violence he has endured. He lies defeated on the ground, his eyes closed as he questions the right way to treat the minority.